Hi, I'm Jane.
Hello, so I'm Dr. P on Twitter. My name is Dr. Dion Joseph, and I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been on Twitter for about 3 years now. So I'm just a very sort of gender critical ultra clinical psychologist working here in the UK.
And I'm Bex.
And we are
Insightful Sisters.
Well, hello, Dr. P. We're really excited to have you with us. On X, it says Dr. P. Is that a typo?
No, it's not. It's a bit of a joke. Somebody gave me an honorary doctorate in turfdom. So I got a certificate and everything. So I've got 2 doctorates now. I've got my certificate of turfery.
I think we all should have one of those. Might add doctor to my name. I'm sure we've all done at least one degree on gender critical.
In this madness, a degree in insanity.
Yeah.
And trying to keep your head.
Yeah. So you are a chartered clinical psychologist, you're an expert witness, an autism assessor, a safeguarding expert.
That's right.
And you did all of that, and at the same time, you write fantastic articles. I mean,
thank you.
We've all loved them. And then you recently got outed. So what happened?
I did,
How did that happen?
I'm not quite sure how, but between Lindsay Watson and Fred Wallace, they found out my identity, and they published my partial address, my name, on X. So I had a bit of a run-in with the police down here in Lewisham, where I live. So I just thought, what the hell, they've done it already. People know who I am, so I may as well just go the whole hog. I had been anonymous or pseudonymous for about 3 years. So Fred Wallace and it was the bloke in what's his name, Tristan Ginger in Canada. He outed me. So I just thought, I'll just go for it. I'm not saying anything wrong. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm not calling for anyone individually to be harmed. I am merely speaking what I believe everyone knows to be the truth. What I know everyone knows to be the truth, because we are all human beings. We know what's what. So I just thought, I'll just come out. I'll just go for it. So I went on to GB News about a fortnight, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I just thought, I'll do it. I'll do it.
You went big.
I shouldn't need to, I shouldn't really need to, Jane, because as I said, what I'm saying is it should not be controversial. Somebody saying there are 2 sexes, people can't change sex, and that to try and transition children is damaging should not, I haven't discovered Fermat's last theorem or, worked out the meaning of the universe. I am just stating obvious facts and truths, saying what everyone knows to be the truth. It just indicates what a terrible and parlous state of affairs we have been reduced to because of gender ideology, and how profoundly damaging it has been to the fabric and structure of society over the past 20 years.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about how you got to this place. So when did you first realise what was going on? Do you call yourself a gender critical or sex realist?
No,
or
just realist. Just a
realist.
normal, real human being. Yeah, I'm just a normal woman who knows what a woman is and knows what a man is. I shouldn't need to have a label applied to myself for just stating biological reality. Yeah, about 5 years ago, I had been living in the Middle East. And as I've said before in other podcasts, I had no idea any of this was going on. I didn't know at all. And part of the reason why I didn't know is obviously I was out there in the Middle East. And so clearly that hasn't permeated to that culture. But also they're very open about blocking things on the internet. And they don't hide it. So if you go on a page they don't like, you'll get a cartoon, a really friendly little cartoon character will come up, and it will say something like, "Oops, you can't get onto this page," or something to that effect. So essentially, I had no idea this was going on. And I was working in schools out there, the British schools in Qatar, working as a clinical psychologist, doing assessments and stuff like that. Gender was not mentioned at all. It just wasn't mentioned. It could have been on another planet. I had no idea. And then I came back to the UK and I sort of got onto Facebook, which I've been thrown off. And it was Zach Bridges. I will not call any man by a female name. Zach Bridges, I think, oh God, it was about 5, 6 years ago, wanted to race as a woman. And I remember looking at this thinking, it was just a bloke with long hair. This is a joke. Surely nobody is taking him seriously. And that's what opened my eyes. And I realized that he was being taken seriously and people were calling him a woman. And that was my first introduction to him. I won't say I peaked, because I never from the instant I knew what was happening, from literally the nanosecond after seeing Bridges' picture on his bike, I just thought this is complete nonsense and I'm not having any of it. So I've always been a sex realist in this respect.
Well, one of the things I love about reading your articles is your
Mm-hmm.
attitude to language, because you don't just sort of draw the lines about what you will and won't do. You also reinvent, which is great because the other side has reinvented an awful lot of things.
They have.
So
They've
you've got, you
corrupted
call it,
language.
we've got gender flippity flam.
I've got so many. I've come up with another one, which I'll tell you about. But I've got so many, yeah.
Go on, trans type psychopath. The
Mm-hmm.
trans stroop effect. That was an interesting one.
Yes.
Just tell us about that one. What's that mean?
Okay, in psychology, there's a very well-known phenomenon called the stroop effect, which is when you are seeing two anomalous stimuli at the same time. So you're seeing two discordant things happening in front of you. So the classic way it's presented is that you have the words for colours like written out in English. So red, blue, yellow, green will be written in the colour of the word. But when you take the word and you write it in a different colour, there's a delay in processing that information. So say red is written in black and blue is written in green. And that delay in processing information is called the stroop effect. And it's your brain literally trying to work out what it's seeing, what's going on in front of me. So I just thought we can apply this concept of this delay, this sort of cognitive dissonance and this confusion that the brain goes through. We can apply this so easily to a human being who is cross-dressing. Your brain is having to unravel two discordant, anomalous stimuli at the same time. It's not so strong for women because women have more freedom to express themselves through clothes. But certainly in this culture, it's strong when you see a man wearing a dress or, God forbid, growing breasts. So this is the trans stroop effect. I said it's not so strong for women, but it's not just wearing trousers or wearing male clothes. It's when women have beards and they start taking on these sort of slightly male features. That's when it brings you up short. And there's actually a young woman where I live down here, and I can see her transition is progressing, and I keep running into her in our local Turkish supermarket. And every time I see her, she's getting worse. Every time I look at her, she's quite small. She's about 5'2". She's got womanly hips. Her body's like then she'll turn around and there's this person with a beard. She's got terrible acne. You can literally see the hormones are poisoning her. And even though I invented the term trans stroop effect, and I know what it is, I still get, that second, I just get taken aback.
Yeah.
I'm like, what am I seeing? What is this? So that is the trans stroop effect, when a human being is trying to blend both sexes at the same time. We are not evolved for this, Jane. I remember being taught that, that a baby of a day old will look preferentially at a female face. And that can be any woman's face. It doesn't have to be the same race, doesn't have to be their mum. So we are born with this ability to distinguish males from females.
Yeah.
And we are trying to say that this is not part of our neurobiology. It's not hardwired into us.
Are women better at discerning sex, looking at people and deciding?
Yeah. I say on my post, you are here reading this post because one of your female ancestors, whether it was 1,000 years ago, whether it was 500 years ago, whether it was 30 years ago, looked at something, looked at a man, thought that's a threat. I'm legging it. I'm getting out of here. And those genes, those survival genes have come down to you. And you are now being told to turn off your protective, evolutionary endowed mechanism to recognize danger. Just to pander to I don't know what's going on in these men's heads. Women are better at recognizing, because obviously, as Amy Souza says, there is an asymmetry of risk. A 6-foot man is not going to get beaten up or raped by a 5'2" trans man, but the opposite does happen and can happen. But we are being told to switch off all of those protective mechanisms.
Yeah.
The most basic being our sex recognition mechanism. This is an attack on women. Gender ideology is an attack on women and girls and females. That's all it is, dressed up as rights and inclusivity. I think it's the worst word in English language. I think it's the most dangerous word we've invented, God knows how long. Every time I hear inclusivity, I think boundary violation. We are exclusive for a reason. You exclude certain people for a reason. And we've just decided that we don't need to do that. We've literally decided we can rewrite society, we can rewrite humanity, we can rewrite our evolution. It's hubris of the highest level, and we're going to fall flat on our faces.
I'm going to pass across to Bex in a minute, but
Mhm.
before I do that, I just want to know what the additional word you invented last night in bed was, because this is a
Okay,
world exclusive.
it is a word. It was obsessive transgender disorder. So I was lying and I'm trying to formulate it. One of the concepts that I've come up with alongside with another Twitter person was one thing I really feel strongly about is we must not use, as you say, their language. And one term we must never use is gender dysphoria. Because, as I've said repeatedly in my tweets, gender dysphoria does not exist. It's a false construct. Nobody has gender dysphoria. Nobody in the entire history of humanity has ever had gender dysphoria. What people have are what I'm calling harmful transgender ideations. An ideation is when you get stuck in like a repeated pattern of thoughts. You're stuck on a little roundabout of thoughts. That's what people have. They don't have this sort of existential metaphysical condition called gender dysphoria. They're just caught up in their own cognitive distortions and they can't get out of them. So as I was listening to somebody talking last night, so I thought, the step one is children when they get into these harmful transgender ideations. Yeah. The next step is like it's a sister of obsessive compulsive disorder, but it's obsessive transgender disorder when your entire life, your behaviors are now taken over by being affirmed, by passing, by living as the member of the opposite sex. So that's step two. And then step three is when you actually believe you've become the opposite sex. Just a second looking at some bloke talking about how he's getting periods every month. Then you have ticked over into what I consider to be a state of psychosis. You are in a state of altered reality. You actually think now that you have become the opposite sex. Yeah. And I see it as a form of mental illness. So I'm just sort of thinking about how to complete my formulation from harmful transgender ideations to obsessive transgender disorder to trans type psychosis.
We're going to look forward to that article. That's going to be amazing. I'll pass
Yeah,
across to
yeah.
Bex because she's got some
Mhm,
questions for you on the
mhm.
profession.
Hi, Bex. Hello.
Hi. So I want to focus, on the profession itself and particularly on young people. I
Mhm.
mean, you've spoken there about that this is tipping into psychosis, and yet it seems like all schools around mental health have been very captured. Why are mental health services failing people?
Well, first off, I would say my DMs tell me otherwise. At least 2 or 3 times a week, I'll get somebody saying, "Can I DM you, Dr. P?" And it'll be a clinical psychologist in America or Australia or somewhere. And they'll say, "We know this is not good. We know this is all wrong, but I'm not allowed to say anything at work, but please keep speaking out." So what I think is happening is that for whatever reason, maybe 100 or 200 people have captured the entire profession. But they haven't actually captured the profession because I'm trying to think as I'm talking to you, we're enslaved at the moment. We're unwilling followers. I think most psychologists, from my personal experience, know what's happening. They're too scared to speak out. They've got mortgages, they've got jobs, you know. As a consequence of speaking out, I've had the people email my employers. The police came round to my house with a Ring doorbell, personal alarm system. I'm on priority to if I call 999. So this is what happens when you speak out. It's not that psychologists, some I think are almost in a state of mental illness themselves. Most know what's going on, but they don't want to have to be, you know, on speed dial to their local police station. And this happened to me as a consequence of being outed. That's what's going on.
It's ruling by fear. I mean, it's quite shocking how total that takeover has been in a field that you would expect to be very sort of cautious and very research led.
I'm surprised and I'm not surprised. Psychologists have had form for doing this forever. I was just reading about bicycle face the other day. Yeah, my other name for fake news gender is gender dysphoria bicycle face, right? Because there was this diagnosis at about 18 when women started going on bicycles and leaving their homes. And there was an actual diagnosis called bicycle face, where your face would get stuck in this surprise expression. And women were told they were going to get bicycle face. So you know who was telling women they're going to get bicycle face? The medical doctors and the psychiatrists, all blokes in top hats of the day, you know? We go back to Stalin and the gulags. It was psychiatrists telling people they were nuts and shipping them off to Siberia. So we have form with this. We are human just like anybody else. So we have form in I was reading also about drapetomia, which was the irrational fear of enslaved people on the plantations to try and escape to the north. Black people, my recent ancestors, this was an actual psychological condition called drapetomia. And it was written up in all the medical journals of the day. But we've had lobotomies, we've had these things, we've had false memories, we've had recovered memories. I'm surprised that psychologists are surprised that we're in this. We should not be surprised.
There is some truth there. As you go through history, there are often psychological trends or almost socially recognized ways to go off the rails. So, like you say, we've had dancing plagues, we've had the vapors, we've had all sorts. There's no mechanism to start recognizing, okay, this is another one of these major trends and this is how we respond.
I think what's different about this trend, say, from the dancing plague is what we're doing now. It's the internet. It's the speed at which these ideas can get communicated. That is the difference. And I think this is like it's like a vector. It's like a disease vector. The internet has been like a disease vector for this.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's different now. Also, that this is just the most bonkers idea. But God, in 100 years or 50 years time, there's going to be some other craziness going to come out.
That's quite a scary thought. What could come next?
Yeah, what can come? I mean, nobody could have thought we would be here now.
No.
I was just looking this morning about somebody in Australia a lady getting censured for saying men shouldn't be breastfeeding. I mean, who would have thought even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when we were being told to be polite and it's just pronouns and it's just a matter of politeness, who would have thought we could be here so quickly? As psychologists, we do know different. We know about conformity. We know about milligrams turning up the shocks, which even though I'm saying, look, we are human beings like everyone else, we still have an extra responsibility not to fall in for this.
I know when I was younger, the big discussion was anorexia, and a lot of girls in particular seem to get anorexia. And we've almost seen that same vulnerable group of girls convert directly into this. And at some stage as a society, we need to be intelligent enough to recognise this pattern and defend against it.
But I think the difference with anorexia is nobody could make £4,000 a month selling an anorexic hormones. That's the difference. It's money. It's big business behind. Nobody had a vested interest in keeping girls anorexic or cutting.
It's marketing as well, isn't it? And that's quite new, it seems.
Well, as I said, I think it's the want of sounding like a conspiracy. Well, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. The second part of my paper that's coming out very shortly looks at how much money is being made. The pharmaceutical industries are raking it in. They are making billions. As I said, nobody made billions out of a girl buying some razor blades from Boots and cutting her arm. So you've got a combination of the internet spreading this contagion, and then you've got the massively powerful force of big pharma pushing it. So you're being squeezed in both directions. And I do think politicians are being directed by these huge, great pharmaceutical companies to keep this going and to pass laws that allow it to happen. If you put someone on hormones, you've got a patient for the rest of their life. Human beings have been commodified. It's the ultimate commodification of the human body. They sold us all the Alexas and cars and whatever, sat-nav systems. What else can we sell people who've literally got everything? We can sell them their own bodies. We can commodify their bodies, tell them their bodies, and we can sell their bodies back to them. And this is why it's like the ultimate end stage of capitalism. There's only so many things you can buy in your house, holidays you can go on a year, or how many times you can change your car. You get to the point, you've got everything. I've got a giant skip outside my house. I'm just thinking, where does all this stuff come from? If it's emptying my skip all day. But if you can sell your body back to you, you've got an endless patient to the day they die. And that's what's happened.
Yeah, gosh. Something that I have thought for a long time is we're pathologizing, especially for young women, something that's actually a very normal part of growing up, where we realise how much of it isn't actually natural, is this performance that you're expected to take on. Every woman, to some extent, feels she has to put on a mask to be feminine.
Mm-hmm.
How legitimate is gender dysphoria?
It's not legitimate at all. I call it a false construct. And I'm looking at it purely from the point of view of how we how we arrive at clinical diagnosis, how things get into the DSM, and gender dysphoria has no empirical basis. Where was their population cohort? Who did they test it on? Where are the measures? How do we know the severity? How do we know when it stopped? Do we have different measures for males? Every single psychological test, apart from the IQ, 99% of psychological tests as a clinical psychologist, this is my bread and butter, are normed for males and you have norms for females. You can't apply norms, say, for an autism test for a 15-year-old boy. If you apply the male norms to the female norms, you've got the wrong result. You haven't got the right result. So for us to know that gender dysphoria is real, we need to have some way of measuring it, some way of describing it properly, some way of measuring it, some way of knowing who's got it, what severity they've got it, whether they've got it at subclinical levels, whether they've got it at severe. None of this applies to gender dysphoria. Somebody just rocks up in the room and says, I want to be of the opposite sex. And and the clinician, I'm using that in terms in inverted commas, makes a diagnosis. So there should be exclusionary criteria, as there are for every other thing, psychological condition, to diagnose somebody with gender dysphoria. So I call it a false construct. And as I've said repeatedly, I'm not saying that people are not feeling something. They are feeling something, but that something is not gender dysphoria. What they are feeling, I put it in the family of anxiety disorders. They are feeling anxious about particular parts of their body. They somaticize that anxiety and they focus it on their breasts, or their, whatever. They're female, whatever. They've just decided they don't like part of their body. And in this case, they don't like their sexed body. And so in that respect, I call it somaticized anxiety disorder. If we started treating gender dysphoria as pretends to be as just another form of anxiety disorder, we know how to treat. But having said that, I think most of the time we just ignore these youngsters because what we're all forgetting, two things are happening, I think. Because of different foods and nutrition, girls are starting their periods a lot earlier. I think in the Victorian times, girls started their periods at 14. I think it's now down to about 12, 9, I don't know. It's a lot young, about 10. So it's come right down, but the brain is still not developed, Your brain is still your younger brain is having to now deal with these physiological changes in your body, which are hard. Your brain is still doing all of its neurobiological development. That's still going on. So of course you are going to, and then we've got all the impacts of porn and expectations and blah, blah, blah going on in society. My daughter sent me, I thought this was so illustrative. She's early 20s and she sent me something the other day. And it was a little girl getting her hair done. It was a little African-American girl. And this child must have been about 5. And the mother was putting in false extensions. And then she did this long thing and she put these puffs. And my daughter said, Mum, do you not think that? I said, no. You've just told this little 5-year-old girl that she's already, as what Amy Souza, I love her post. She calls it, this little child has already been told she has to perform femininity. Mum should just put her in 2 little puffs and that was it. But she went through this whole thing of putting all these false things on the girl's head and then put her up on the net on Instagram, and all the comments, oh, she looks lovely, your baby looks. I'm thinking, no, this is wrong. So girls particularly are being told they have to perform femininity and they don't want to. Instead of just saying, look, you don't have to perform femininity like that. They're escaping. So I did a post where I did a different routes into gender dysphoria, and I call this one trauma escape. The girls are escaping from trauma.
What should psychologists be doing?
First of all, we don't pathologize. We don't. I talk to my daughter quite a lot, and youngsters nowadays, I've learned from her, they don't like discomfort. And we had this conversation a couple of years ago. She said, "Oh, Mum, do you want me to feel discomfort?" And I said, "Yeah, because discomfort is part of the human condition. Everyone feels discomfort." And she was absolutely stunned that I said to her that you are going to feel discomfort. Things will make you feel unhappy. So we don't pathologize the normal range of human emotions. We cannot always be happy and satisfied and getting on with our friends. To wake up feeling crap some days is normal. It's part of the normal human condition. We expect to be happy all the time, and children expect to be happy all the time. So first of all, we tell them that, you're going to feel crap sometimes. That's just normal. Your brain is literally rewiring itself. So of course you are going to feel confused and unhappy and abnormal, but you're not. You're not abnormal. I was watching this thing about, Malcolm in the Middle has been rebooted, and I just saw the little clip about the non-binary sibling. And the little clip from it was this obviously female child saying, I always felt wrong. She's talking to her dad about why she's non-binary. And I just thought, oh my God, I can't believe Disney just did that. They just normalized. They just told children that just being a normal teenager is wrong. I thought, how irresponsible is this message? For this girl to say, I always felt wrong, so therefore I'm non-binary. What she felt was just normal growing up. It's criminal. So my motto, I change it every now and again it was hold firm, don't affirm. Never, ever, ever, ever affirm anybody, because you are affirming a lie. You are reinforcing their cognitive distortions. That's the first thing we do with kids. No gender. You walk through that door, we're not mentioning gender. Do you know what? I was thinking about this the other day, and I realized I came through my entire first degree. I did a joint degree in sociology, and I think it might have been mentioned in our sociology as our master status being our sex, which was immutable, which we couldn't change. This is what Reading was teaching in 1990, Reading University. Sociology was teaching you cannot change sex. Your master status is your sex and it is immutable, right? But I remember I thought I came through my entire my training, and then 30 years as a clinical psychologist. I don't think I actually heard the word gender being mentioned once. I can't remember it. As an undergraduate, as a doctoral student, as a clinical psychologist, it just never got mentioned. It was like Martians, it was like talking about Martian psychology or people from Venus. It just was not mentioned. But we're not being allowed to ask the questions. I'm being investigated by my professional body now for my harmful tweets. That's what they do. Anyone who sticks their head above the parapet gets knocked down.
It's a very scary place to be in a field that really matters. I will pass on to Jane now because she's going to discuss the Finnish study and, the fallout of that.
I'm listening to you, Dion, and I'm thinking, I wish I'd lived next door to you when I had young children. It would have been really handy.
Well, this is why I keep tweeting 50,000 times a day, because I just thought, please, let someone out there be listening.
Yeah.
Please,
Dion talks sense. Right.
Thank you.
So we wanted to talk to you about the Finnish study. Lots of us who haven't got a scientific background, we struggle really with. I mean, we could read the headlines, but I saw you talking about it. I think it was on GB News, and it made such a lot of sense. So,
thank you.
Can you tell us a bit about it and why it is such an important study?
Okay, essentially, the Finnish study said water is wet. It said that if you cut bits off people, they're going to get worse. That's a top view of it. So what they did was they followed for 24 years, nearly 2,100 youngsters in Finland, and so they wanted to see what was going to happen to these people before and after they'd received gender affirming care. So what they found was that the people they did it through 2 universities, so it was quite a tight study. And they also asked the question, I think it was 2010 was the cutoff, when they had this massive 5,000% increase. They wanted to know were the cohort of people presenting with gender problems different before 2010 and after 2010. And what they essentially found was that people who went in for gender affirming care got considerably worse. Their psychiatric morbidity went shooting up as a result of having this intervention. And they also found that the people who wanted it were sicker in the first place in terms of accessing psychiatric care. So it was a subset of the Finnish population of youngsters who were already unwell psychologically, went and got gender affirming care, so-called, and they got considerably worse afterwards. And they designed it very well that each person in the study had 2 matched controls who were matched for age, even for the town they came from. So they were able to control it really well. They got children from the same town, or youngsters. So you had 2 males and you had 2 females for each person that was in the study. So that, so say a girl wanted to become a boy, a male wanted to become a female. So they had the reference to start her off with, her female cohort, and then they had the male cohort at the end, and they compared their mental health. So all bases were covered. And what they found was that when they looked at the need for psychiatric treatment after life-saving healthcare, they found that the male to females, their psychiatric morbidity, for want of a better word, went from 10% to 60%. And from females to males, it went from 21% to 54%. So basically, everybody got worse as a result of gender affirming care. it is again saying water is wet. There shouldn't have been a need for a Finnish study. We shouldn't have done it. I think the Finnish study is the equivalent of us now looking back at the Black Death and thinking, of course it's the rats and the fleas. Can't you not see? It's the fleas. It's so obvious what's causing the Black Death. And this is essentially what the Finnish study said. It's the fleas on the rats. It's saying that if you interfere with people's normal development, if you give them hormones, if you give them phalloplasties and chest surgery, they will get worse because you're not addressing the underlying problems. Going back to what I said earlier, this is about your ideations. This is about what's going on in your mind. It's not about what's going on your chest. It's not about what's going on in your vagina or whatever. It's about what's going on in your head. And that's where it needs to be fixed. Not by removing healthy tissue and disrupting your endocrine system, putting people into chronic illness, into chronic pain. And, when I was training years ago, I did a 6-month placement at the chronic pain unit at St. Thomas's Hospital. And I think we are underestimating, on top of everything else, the impact of chronic pain on people's lives when they've had these surgeries,
And things like urinary incontinence.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a nice thing to live with, is it?
And fecal incontinence and fistulas. I was listening to a surgeon last night. I can't remember his name offhand. And it was like descending into the depths of hell because he was giving a surgeon's perspective on what was going on with these with the internal stitches and having to stretch and getting skin from the wrong part of the body. It almost parallels what the Nazis were doing. We're doing it now, the most egregious and amoral human experimentation.
Yes.
And we're doing it on youngsters.
Yeah.
We're doing it on children.
And we're doing it on kids who've never had the chance to stand outside the chip shop and flirt or snog anybody or all the ordinary things that kids get up to sort of pre having any sort of sexual relationship. They do, they learn how to have relationships.
And one thing the surgeon said the other night, I can't remember his name. It's really good. I'm going to post it. He said that which I didn't know. He was talking about the chest masculinization surgery, and he said that there's a nerve. I can't remember. I don't remember the name, but the nerve goes straight from the nipple to the brain. It goes straight up, and it's partly it is to release breast milk when the child is sucking, but it's also to give you pleasure. And he was saying that when these girls get their chest masculinization surgery, even if they choose to keep the nipples, that nerve has been cut. So they've got the appearance of nipples, but it now has no sensation and it has no function.
Yeah.
And I was really struck by this as someone who breastfed, tried to breastfeed and was very bad at it. But, how our bodies are so wonderfully put together. And we're riding a wrecking ball.
Yeah.
It's
in a way,
ball.
it's so obvious that you do that. That would happen, isn't it? If you, my daughter had an operation on her jaw at some point when she was a teenager, and she lost a little sensation in a part of her lip, and it's never come back. And yet,
yes,
we all know somebody like that who's had that sort of injury or operation, and yet we're supposed to believe that you can chop into or alter people's genitals and somehow that they're still having some sort of sexual pleasure from them. It's a ridiculous idea.
Well, of course, it's horrific. It is absolutely horrific. This is the biggest medical crime in human history. In fact, it's one of the biggest crimes in human history. I'll take off the medical. I say gender affirming care is the third biggest crime in history after the transatlantic slave trade, the Holocaust. This is number 3, and we're living through it, and we're letting it happen. And everyone's just sort of looking the other way. And in fact, the paper, I put part 1 up, and I need to do part 2 over the weekend. I need to finish it. It's about inattentional blindness. We've been so busy looking at the rights of trans people to go into toilets and changing rooms. We're not looking at the big thing that's right in front of us, which is the absolute generational horror and crime that we're allowing to happen.
Yeah.
To adults and children, for nobody. Nobody should have this at no age. There's no magic cut-off point at 18 when it's okay to cut your breasts off. No. My mother recently had cancer, she's 89, she had breast cancer. She's okay now, but Guy's Hospital were absolutely wonderful. But I remember the surgeon sitting there and saying, we will do everything we can to preserve your breast tissue because it's important. My mum is 89. And I said, well, what's the oldest you've ever done a reconstruction on? And he said, 92. because women's breasts are important. Yet we're cutting the breasts off 13, 14-year-old girls.
Yeah.
This is just pure criminality. It's criminality, nothing else.
I wondered about what would happen to the people who'd taken part in the Finnish study. There's 2,000
Mhm,
people there who now
mhm,
know that their care has not helped them at all. That's a terrible
mhm.
thing, isn't it?
My prediction is a wave of suicides and or homicides. That's what we're going to get. And we're beginning to see the homicides with somebody. I was listening to a detransition the other night, and he was saying that when he read the W Path files, his how he just sort of fell apart emotionally because he realized he'd been lied to. And I think when these people run out of cognitive distortions, when the chronic pain catches up with them, when the chronic dysfunction catches up with them, I think we're unleashing a wave of angry, disaffected, emotionally dysregulated, chemically poisoned youngsters onto the world. We're just seeing the beginning edge of it. And in countries where there are guns and it's easy to kill lots of people at the same time, that's what's going to happen. And I think a lot of parents are going to get murdered. I predict it. These people are going to kill their parents.
This is awful.
Mhm.
I remember this. Was it a Swedish study that found that the suicide risk went up? Was it after 7 years?
Yeah, yeah. I call it the 7-year switch. Yeah, after 7 years, 'cause it takes about that long for you to run out of cognitive distortions and think, "Damn, what did I do?" And also, again, as I keep saying, the chronic dysfunction and the chronic pain to catch up with you. And it's gonna go either one way or the other. That rage, the rage they feel at what's been done is gonna either be turned inwards or it's gonna be turned outwards. It's gonna be turned inwards in terms of suicides and drugs and dysfunctional behavior, or it's gonna be turned out into homicides and mass shootings and mass killings. We created this problem. We created this problem out of thin air for no good reason at all.
Thank
Nothing. There was
thank
no reason
goodness
for it.
we have voices like yours, and
Mm.
well, I think we all try and do a little bit, don't we? We do our little bit to try and get the message out.
Yeah, yeah. I try it all the time. I just hope that people don't get bored of seeing old Dr. P's again. I reposted a paragraph from one of our articles. I'm just saying the same thing over and over and over again because it has to. In the Caribbean, we have a saying called one dutty build dam. My mum loves to say it to me. Which is like one brick at a time builds the dam.
Yes.
And this is what we have to do because there are a lot of people in the middle. I never ever ever get into any discussions on Twitter with anyone who thinks that men can become women who's got pronouns in their bios. I'm wasting my time. It's the people in the middle of the distribution curve who were like me 5 years ago who have no idea what's going on. They're the ones we need to reach
Yeah.
and let them know what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are still a lot of them because, like you said, with your doctorate in turfology, there's a lot to find out. There's a lot of research to do. So thank you so
Yeah, but there's
much.
a lot of people who are not being told. People are just not being told, and it's a concerted effort by broadcasters and to just keep the truth from people.
I think there has been a shift in the last couple of years, hasn't there? There's been a shift towards more openness, the fact that we are, people are taking the
Yes.
pronouns off their bios, and the media is starting to use correct pronouns occasionally.
I mean, I know we're going to finish shortly, but this goes back to one of my basic premises about this. Humans, hominids, I was looking this up there, we've been around for 4 million years as hominids, right? And Homo sapiens have been around for 300,000 years, right? You cannot override those instincts, our biological drives and our instincts. The EU can pass 50 billion laws about what women are. But you wake up in the morning, you know what a woman is. You have your monthly period, you have this, you that. Everybody knows what a woman and what a man is
Yeah.
because we are humans, we are sexually dimorphic. So
But
whether
what's
this takes 5 years or 50 years or 10 years, it's going to die.
Yes. Given that we are, we act in certain ways because of our biology and our history, what about the people who, particularly the parents who support their children, or some of them even promote this
Hmm.
ideology to their children? Isn't that a biological anomaly?
Anomaly. Do you know, I was thinking about this the other day and I thought I've got to write a paper about Munchausen's. And one thing I would like to see, right? One statistic I would like to know is how many of these people who are pushing their children into this, how many of those are only children, right? because transing your child is a genetic dead end, right? And if you argue that we've got the selfish gene and we have this overriding urge to reproduce, I think those parents have made a calculation. I'm going to trans this one, even at a subconscious level, possibly, because I've got another one or two who can carry my genetic material on into the next generation. And the benefits to me now, in terms of money, getting a YouTube channel, getting lots of attention, are enough to balance not getting a grandchild from that one, because I've got another two kids who can do it for me. So it's an immediate benefit. There's no loss to them immediately because they've still got other kids who can give them grandchildren. And I think the really interesting statistic would be how many children who are only children are being transed. That's what we would need to see. Because I suspect they've all got brothers and sisters who are doing what mum and dad really want, which is to give them grandchildren. And this trans child is serving the purpose of giving them social cachet, money, attention, whatever is going on in their marriage that needs to be sorted out. This child is the focus of whatever systemic problems are going on in the family. So I think the biological imperative is not being worked against at all. I think it's a calculation they've made. I can trans this one because the other two are going to give me grandchildren. And this one's going to give me money now. That's what I think is going on. And I also think that these mothers, I always thought it was lax parenting. And I thought, no, this is authoritarian parenting. It's highly authoritarian, low empathy parenting that's going on. So I'm just running the ideas around in my head because everyone keeps saying, what about these trans housing mums? What's driving them? And I think what's driving them is immediate rework.
I could talk to you all night, but I can't because
I'll come back whenever. I've got so much to say. I've written about, I think about 16 papers now. They're all about different aspects of this social transitioning, marriage, what's going on in marriages, all sorts.
Well, I think I will pass to Bex because I know that she's waiting in the wings and she gets very arsy if I don't pass across to her.
Hi, so that brings us to our last question, which is the same in every episode, and that is, do you have a woman or women of the moment that you'd like to shout out?
Okay, no, I don't have a woman of the moment. I have a young girl of the moment, and it came across my feed just this morning because there's a school, a Wydeen school, I think it's called, in Gloucestershire. And one of the students there, her name is Cora Tyrrell, because I thought I could do the normal, usual suspects, Helen Joyce, Posey Park. And I thought, no, this young girl has started a petition because they've got unisex toilets in their school. And Cora has stuck her head above the parapet. She's done what all the grown-ass clinical psychologists that have been trained for God knows how many years and whatever haven't done. I don't know how old Cora is. I would imagine, I think she's probably a sixth former. And she's started a petition. She has said, this isn't right. I don't want to go in the loo and I don't want I have two boys. Teenage boys are literally the stupidest people on the planet, honestly. They've got testosterone plus their brains are just, they're nuts. And no girl should be having to put up with that. But I remember how, you know what it was like to be a teenage girl. What the very last thing you want is a boy next to you in the toilet. How dare these parents do it? And ironically, it's at the school that J.K. Rowling went to. And I looked, and of course, the headmistress is a woman. So you've got a woman headmistress at Wydeen School pushing this onto young girls. It is absolutely criminal. Quite frankly, she should be marched out of there in handcuffs for doing this.
I bet she wouldn't share with the same teenage boys she expects her students to share with.
Exactly. And it was the same thing with Theo Upton. The female consultants had their own changing room. Yeah. And to the very people who were supporting Theo Upton weren't having to change with him because they had a separate changing room to the nurses. And this is what's going on. So Cora Tyrrell of Wydeen School in Gloucestershire. Cora, if you're listening to this, well done you. You are an Amazon. You are a brave young woman. You are what we need.
Go Cora.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. So the petition is up. Please, if it's on Twitter, please sign it. Only had about 5,000 signatures this morning. I just think of the horror. I mean, being a 15-year-old girl and there's a boy in the toilet next to you. I can't think of anything worse.
They're idiots at that age, aren't they? They run about, they bang into the doors and
they're going to be looking under and laughing and banging and, girls don't need this. I'm not going to swear. I feel so angry I could swear as a mother of a daughter. This is appalling. When I lived in the Middle East, right, for all their faults, this nonsense would never have happened there. This would be incomprehensible to them that girls be sharing toilets with boys. Teenage schoolgirls, it is shocking. I call it socially distanced sexual assault when this happens. And what does this do to young girls? What does this do to their sense of safety in the world or their sense of worth, their value? It's not just about being inclusive. It is about telling those girls you don't matter. Your safety doesn't matter. Your wishes don't matter. We don't care about you. You are nothing.
Yeah.
This is so dangerous because it's evil, quite frankly. It is evil. What is happening now is evil. And those girls having to share the toilets at Whiting School is evil.
Well, it's made a direct opponent of safeguarding, hasn't it? And I think that anything that we want to do to safeguard ourselves is uninclusive, because safeguarding is naturally an exclusionary process.
Yeah. No men, no exceptions.
Thank you to our listeners. We really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, please do like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to help keep our channel growing and spread the word. Thank you.